Tim, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
My pleasure, Tom. Thanks for inviting me. I'm glad to be here on your program. Sure, I'm an ordained minister, Christian minister, and I served several churches as a pastor many, many years ago. But through my journey, I transitioned to doing more intellectual work, studied New Testament, and eventually earned a PhD in New Testament studies. And I only mention that to say that prepared me to then eventually become a professor of New Testament. But honestly, most of my life is about ministry. And I have done almost all of my teaching, except for some adjunct work here in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. I did most of my teaching is in Myanmar, Southeast Asia. For the last 15 years, I have been there, on and off, maybe up to 4 to 6 months a year. So that's a lot of what I do. In addition to teaching students, these are students who are preparing to go into ministry. I've also been doing workshops for pastors who are thinking about or asking questions about how can they be more effective as leaders in their contexts. And as I already mentioned, my particular focus of my context has been Southeast Asia, Myanmar, which has honestly been a horrendous setting in the last 19 months. But that's a little bit about me and what I've been doing and what my focus is.
Cool. So the topic today is, should we prefer Christianity or atheism? Could you tell me more about your position on that topic?
Sure. I want to say at the beginning, though, that I'm not a philosopher, and I'm not a scientist, and I'm not an apologist. And so I find the topic super interesting, but these are not areas of my expertise. And so as I engage in this, I feel that I just want to acknowledge that I don't know all the language, terminology, or have not done the kind of research you've done in philosophy to be able to interact with you on, at the same level that you can interact with me. So I just wanted to say again, what does it mean about where I am coming from? As a minister and professor of New Testament, my approach is the Christian faith is significantly influenced by the Bible, naturally, because that's what I've been studying, and my own experience, both in my personal life and also significantly in my experience working with people who are suffering, people who are struggling with issues, people who are disillusioned with God or discouraged with God or discouraged about their lives or their relationships. So there's a really heavy practical dimension to how I think and how I've lived over here for the last several decades. And so honestly, I'm a novice when it comes to trying to explain or defend my faith to an atheist. And so I'm not presenting myself as an apologist on the same terms that maybe you're used to. But I do appreciate being able to have this conversation. And I'm going to answer this question in the only way that I know how to do that. And that's as an insider to the Christian faith. And I think this is very important methodologically. And that's something we may want to discuss if you're interested. But my view on discussing any topic is the importance of recognizing where somebody stands, and that it's not, I suppose, if you're talking about gravitation or gravity or gravitational pulls, forces, you can be fairly abstract. But when we're talking about personal things related to personal even philosophy and religion and faith, identifying one's own personal experience and where one comes from, I think is extremely important. And so I'm just declaring myself, and I'm identifying that I'm an insider, and I can't be anything other than that, except in the most abstract, artificial way. So I'm hoping you will help me understand what it's like to be an atheist, but I can speak mostly from a position of being an insider. So as an insider, I can identify many different reasons why I prefer Christianity to atheism. with the caveat that I've never been inside as an atheist. So that's why I said a moment ago, I'm looking to you to tell me why you prefer atheism. But I will tell you why I prefer Christianity vis-a-vis what I imagine it would be like to be an atheist. That's as close as I can get. So all that by way of introduction to say, in short, in my experience, Christian philosophy, theology, and spirituality have been inspirational and life-giving and instructive to me. They've served as guideposts in my ongoing spiritual journey and my growth as a person. And what I found in Jesus Christ and in my Christian faith, I can't find in other worldviews and belief systems in the same way. And there are certainly many other belief systems and parallel concepts. But as a package, what I found in Christianity has been compelling to me. And through Christianity, I've found great meaning and purpose, and values and moral standards to live by, as well as a personal relationship with God that has been very meaningful to me as well. And one of the most important teachings, and this is to bring it down from the more broad level to a little more concrete, is one of the more important teachings of the Bible and central to Christian faith is the love ethic, both love for God and love for neighbor. You know, many religions and non-religious people, and including atheists and agnostics, value love, right, as a key primary value, and also as probably the best hope for attitudes that translate to actions that can be helpful to the world. So I think many of us will agree with that. And for me, that it's Christianity that has elevated this as the central ethic, love, and has informed me as to what it really means to love, and given me so many ideas in practice about what that love looks like for myself as well as for other people. So having said all that, I'll just say a few more things here by way of introduction. I'm not suggesting that I have figured out everything that there is about philosophy, religion, spirituality, let alone the universe. I'm not making any such claim. I really see myself as a learner, and that I'm on a journey of discovery. And there's so much I don't know. And the more I study and the more I listen to other people and different points of view, which is why I'm looking forward to hearing from you today, the more I learn, the more I'm challenged. And so I live in this, what I consider to be a soup of so many different ideas and so many different possibilities and so many things that can't be known for sure. And yet, when it comes down to my own existence, I have to choose at least a provisional philosophy, a provisional worldview that will guide me and help me from day to day. And that's what I've done. And for that purpose, I found Christianity to be extremely helpful. Okay, I think that gives you a kind of an overview. I mean, I have a list, a provisional list of 9 different points about why I prefer Christianity to atheism. But let me save those. And if the conversation goes,
well, actually, can you just list them off really quickly so I can write those down, keep them for later?
Sure. Okay. And again, these are not. I developed this list in the last 2 weeks, Tom. Okay, so I just want you to know that this is. I'm trying to put into words something that I'm not usually asked to give. And so I fully expect that I will refine this list and as time goes on, add to it. But these are the first 9 things that came to mind. Number 1, I'm sorry, they're not going to be as concise as you might like for you writing them down. But it helps me to make sense of my desire to know God and affirms my experience of flourishing when I put my trust in my Creator's love and goodness. So that's number 1. Number 2 is it helps me to interpret my religious experiences with God and provides more content for me as I contemplate the nature and character of God, whom I perceive in and behind nature. Number 3 is provides a accurate description of my existential struggle to do good, to do the good that I imagine to do, or what I would like to be able to do, but often can't do. And it also, with this, provides a direction for how I can experience the grace, more grace, mercy, forgiveness, inspiration, generosity, and so forth. Fourth, provides a source of comfort, guidance, perspective, wisdom, and other resources that I highly value. And that's in the dynamic of the personal relationship with God that I refer to. 5, provides a more substantial basis for morality and life-giving values than atheism, in that right and wrong, love, justice, and so forth are regarded as fundamental principles. Whereas in naturalism, as I understand it, you have to try to derive these values speculatively. So I don't see them in nature. I don't see these same values in nature in any kind of objective way, although I certainly can agree that we could construct a moral system that we could probably agree on. Number 6 is Christianity provides a deeply meaningful and satisfying relationship with other followers of Christ. And what I've experienced in this, in a broad sense of the term community, mutual care, shared value system, hope, and common reference point, Christ, when setting priorities and working through conflicts and other challenges. 7, Christianity provides a better meaning and purpose to human existence. In my opinion, I don't see any inherent meaning or purpose in the universe through through naturalism. But in Christianity, it's core to our philosophy. And then number 8 is it provides hope for life after death. The older I get, the more I'm interested in what happens after my life ends. And through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, my belief in the resurrection of Jesus Christ, that gives me hope. It gives me something rooted in history, as debated as it is, that points to something better. So let me be clear. When I state these 8 points, I want to be really clear. I acknowledge that I am coming from an existential point of view. This is my experience.
Did you say there was 9? There's
9. Did I leave one off? I did say there were 9, and I only gave you 8. And I can't tell you why I only have 8 now on my sheet. So let's just rewind and say there were 8 reasons. And if I can recall the 9th one later, I'll add it back. But I only see 8 here on my sheet.
All right.
So what I want to be clear here about methodologically is that I am not claiming that what I experience in Christianity is unique to the Christian faith, or that there aren't all sorts of challenges and issues related to it. What I'm saying is I want to put these 8 values or to me positive experiences, things that I value from my experience, alongside anybody else's list from any other worldview. And today we're talking mostly about atheism. And so that's what I'd want to talk about is not do my 8 points prove that Christianity is better than atheism. No. Do my 8 points, how do they stack up against what atheism offers? And that's why it's a matter of preference rather than a matter of proof.
Well, so the first thing would be one of the people in the comments said, Dennis Bailey, I'm only interested in believing any religious claims if they're actually true. Can the Reverend convince me Christianity is actually true? I prefer not to believe untrue things. So even if all of the points you said are accurate descriptions of what you feel from being religious, doesn't make it true. Like all of that could be, you can get all of these things, meaning, purpose, value, make sense of things, interprets your experience, helps you to deal with struggle. Like all that can happen from fictional stories too. Pretty much every other religion also has that, and I don't think you're a universalist. So false religions can essentially get all of these things. So is there anything in what you provided that would indicate it's true?
Again, this is going to come down to how you define what's true. Is it scientifically verifiable?
Well, just to clarify, I define true as what corresponds to reality.
Yeah, and I would ask you, uh, does human experience, is that part of reality?
Sure.
Okay, so if it's true to my experience, it's true to reality.
No, if your experience is true, but the fact that it happened in your experience does not mean it's independent of your experience in reality. So I can experience a unicorn. It doesn't mean the unicorn exists in reality. It just exists in my imagination. My imagination exists in reality.
Right. So in other words, you're saying people can have hallucinations, people can have imagination about things that don't. But we're not talking about that kind of thing. We're talking about my experiences related to the types of experiences that you also value. So, like community, like meaning, like purpose. So we should compare apples to apples. So I'm
Well, the
talking.
question is like for those things, you think you have some ideology that gives you a grounds or basis for those things, but that could just be a unicorn, could just be a delusion, illusion. Like none of that makes it true. Even if like I have an interaction with somebody, if I go to a Harry Potter convention and we have a great relationship and friendship and we build meaning and purpose and we look to the book of Harry Potter for guidance on what to do in moral situations and we have this robust community and meaning and purpose in studying the magic of Harry Potter, it can still all be false. None of that makes it true.
That's right. But comparing what I shared with you to a hypothetical situation that you know is absurd, to me, it doesn't seem like a meaningful conversation, Tom. Why don't you compare it to something that's concrete and real, an alternative worldview? Why not atheism? Because that's what we're here to talk about.
Well,
Tell me about how you, as an atheist, find meaning and purpose, and how it can make sense of your own experiences or lack of experiences with God. Um, how it forms the basis for morality. That's what we should be talking about. Is comparing my list to yours, not trying to press me to say, can you prove objectively that these things are true? Because I've already said I can't. And so, yes, I think that you're whoever it is that asked this question, and it was a very good question. It's a question I've had for myself. But is it true? Is it true? Um, but you have to go and when you recognize that there are limits to what we can prove are true, limits to things that are important to us. I don't want to offend Harry Potter fans and suggest that the Harry Potter Club is not important, because I'm sure for them it is very important. But just like video games are very important to video game players. But that's not the same level of talking about human relationships and love and human flourishing and the things that are just so core and important to our lives.
wait, I'm missing the difference here. I literally see no difference between Harry Potter communities and religious communities. I see absolutely no difference there.
Um, the point is, Harry Potter communities aren't setting out with the same kind of goals. I don't think the same kind of goals and seeking to answer the same kind of questions that I, as a Christian, am trying to do. And again, why are we talking about Harry Potter? We should be talking about atheism, and let's put the atheistic naturalist worldview alongside of the Christian worldview, because that's really what we're comparing. That's the whole question today. Should we prefer Christianity to atheism?
Right.
And I'm told you this is the reason that what I get from Christianity, because I get these things from Christianity and I don't see how I could get them from atheism, I prefer Christianity. That's the point. I'm not trying to convince your followers who are atheists to believe what I'm saying. I'm asking them just to listen to what I'm saying and to hear my experience, and for them to look at their own experience, and let's discuss that back and forth.
Well, like you said the Harry Potter example was ridiculous, and it's if something is ridiculous, we probably shouldn't believe it, right? It's something we should not believe. We should reject belief in that thing because it's ridiculous. You'd agree, I imagine.
Uh, yes, but Tom, I know that's a setup. Okay, because your next point is, and belief in God is ridiculous, so we shouldn't talk about that either.
Well, no, that would be if we should prefer atheism or theism, if a position is ridiculous, then we should reject it and be atheists. And so the first stage you should do is show your position is not ridiculous. Because if it is, if your position is analogous to Harry Potter and it is ridiculous, then we should reject both of them and we should then prefer atheism.
Well, my answer to that, again, it's where your starting point is and how you're going to go about demonstrating what is ridiculous and what isn't. And
that's why I'm asking you. I'm asking you to tell me the difference between Harry Potter and Christianity.
What I'm
I don't
saying,
see.
Yeah, no, I hear you say you don't see any difference because the concepts are unprovable. Is that fair? Is that what you're saying? They're not demonstrable in a material sort of way. Is that why you would say it's ridiculous?
No, I mean, you can only prove things in logic and math. So science is tentative. You can't prove anything. But you do need some reason to think that one proposition is true and the other one is false for there to be a difference. Like, that's kind of an important fact. If we should be justified in believing something, is if there's a reason to believe this is more likely true than the alternative.
I think what I'm trying to say is that I find that my experience with the Christian faith has compelled me to value it, and I will acknowledge that I can't prove the existence of God. I can't prove that these things are true to the satisfaction of somebody who's on the outside.
Well, okay, so I just want to clarify. There's a difference between proof and evidence. You don't need evidence. You don't need proof to have evidence. So like proof is like 100%. Evidence is like 1%. So like we all know we can't prove anything, but if you have if you can't provide evidence to 1%, and you're willing to make that concession, that's what we're asking about. Do you have anything that can even give 1% of evidence to show there's a reason to believe it's true more than false? No one cares about proof. We want evidence.
Yeah. And what I had said earlier is the evidence for me is in my personal experience. It's what I've experienced in my relationship with God. It's my experience when I believe the principles and I put them into practice. My evidence is how it has changed my life, how it has changed how I view myself, how I treat other people. It influences my work. All of that is for me, the evidence is that it works in my life. Not everything works. There are a lot of things I don't understand, a lot of questions I still have, but I found so much that does work and that is meaningful to me in practice. That's my evidence. That's my evidence. And I can give you additional reasons why I think it's certainly understandable, but it's contested evidence. That's outside my experience. So I've been focusing mostly on my own experience rather than talk about things that you know very well, the traditional evidence that's presented for the Christian faith. But all that's contested, and you know that. And so,
yeah. So I'm asking specifically about like the 8 points you listed. Our perspective that isn't evidence. So we want to know why you think that's evidence, because if your evidence that can presumably move the dial even 1% is your personal experience, that seems to work equally as well for Harry Potter. They have equally as much profound experiences and cultural experiences and meaning and purpose and all that stuff. And so if those things count as evidence, then it would be equally as evidence for Harry Potter being true as it is for Christianity to be true. To me, that doesn't seem to make sense. And so I don't see why personal experience would count as evidence in the first place. I mean, it's nice to have it. It's a good way to build a hypothesis that you have an experience, but it's not evidence the hypothesis is true. It's just a way to build a hypothesis.
I think we are, human beings, we are always going to be living in the world where we cannot demonstrate conclusively that our worldview is correct.
Well, again, I don't care about demonstrate conclusively. I want 1% evidence. I don't need 57% evidence and 1%.
I don't. Maybe you can help me find a better way to say what I'm saying. Because I'm trying to explain it to you. Is to me my experience with God in prayer, my experiences, encounters with God, my the application of the philosophies and teaching of Scripture in my life, all of those things are evidence to me because it's qualitative evidence. And so
Why?
it's personal because it's convincing. It's compelling to me.
Why is it compelling? What is it about this fact that makes it compelling that it's true?
Because it's life changing. When maybe I'm being too abstract. When I found myself, I'll tell you a couple stories, and that may help you understand more where I'm coming from as a Christian existentialist. When I was 14 years old, I was in our Christian tradition, very conservative Christian tradition. We had to go to church every Sunday night, and so my parents were off at church, and we lived 2 blocks away from this church, and it was raining, and I, as a rebellious teenager, was sitting on the porch smoking a cigarette, and knowing my parents would kill me if they found me smoking a cigarette and ditching church. And so it got, a little teenage, energy around that. And then I had the gall I don't know why I did this. I just looked up to heaven and said a prayer. I said, God, if you make it stop raining, I'll go to church. So what do you think happened? Did it stop raining?
Yes.
I thought you might say that. No, it didn't. And that was the best thing in the world that could have happened to me, because I heard a voice in my head. It could have been from anywhere, but I'm just telling you my experience. I heard a voice in my head that said, who are you to give conditions to the Almighty God? And for me, it was a totally unexpected experience. I threw out my cigarette, walked to the church in the rain, got wet, and sat down in the back of row. And that night I submitted myself. I gave myself to God. What that means is I said, God, I will do your will with my life. So that's a personal experience. I can't replicate that for anybody else, but I can share it as my experience. And that was convincing to me that God was real and God was calling me to a different kind of relationship with him. And so that's one experience. And I've had other ones too that have been life-changing over the years as well.
Well, if a Hindu came to you and they said they had a experience with the elephant-headed god, and they told them to go to whatever they call church, do you think you would? What?
Temple.
Temple. Yeah. Do you think that would be evidence that they actually met an elephant-headed god, or evidence they probably had a delusion, illusion, misconception, hallucination, one of those things?
It would only be suggestive at best, because I wouldn't be able to know. But I would have to look at their behavior. I mean, that's what a psychologist would do, right? So,
I don't think so.
No, yeah, absolutely. A psychologist, when they hear a different idea, they may not make a judgment about what the person says, but it would say, how is this affecting how they live?
I don't think they ask that. I'm pretty familiar with psychology, and the fact that people are convicted in their beliefs and it changes their lifestyle has absolutely no implications towards its truth whatsoever.
Well, you're going 2 different directions here. What do you mean, not truth?
So if someone has a testimony that they experienced something and it profoundly affects the way they act and it changes their life positively or negatively, psychologists don't in any way care. That doesn't in any way affect their diagnosis of whether or not it was a delusion. The criterions for what qualifies as a delusion has nothing to do with how it affects someone's life.
Well, you may be right about that, because I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I just know what I've read, and what little bit I've read suggests. So I'll just accept what you're saying. I mean, I don't have any reason to argue with you. My point, though, is not how psychologists work. I shouldn't have even brought that up, I guess. My point is more that it seems to me that what psychologists are interested in my experience, having gone to therapy myself, is that they want to know how my beliefs affect how I live, and whether there's there's dysfunction, whether there is function, whether it's constructive or whether it's destructive. And so for me, if somebody comes to me and they say they've had this wonderful experience with Ganesh, the Hindu elephant god, and they turn into the most loving, wonderful person, I'm going to say, gee, I have no idea what experience they had, but I'm sure glad he's a loving person now. And I think that's as far as I would go with it. I'm not in a position of an all-knowing judge and evaluator of everybody's experience.
Right. The job of a therapist is to make people happy. So if you're already happy, they're not going to change it regardless of whether or not it's true. Their goal isn't to make you believe true things.
It's not just happy, it's functional. And I'm talking about from my own standards of I don't want to just be happy. You could take happy pills and be happy. But it's about how you function in the world and how that corresponds to the values that you have. You say, we're not just talking about me having, just to put this in context, I'm not just talking about an experience I had on the mountaintop one time and claiming that I saw angels dancing across the sky, and you go, that's really special. I'm talking about an experience I had with God that fits in with a whole religious tradition and how that wound up influencing my life in a positive way that has borne fruit it's good for me and good for my relationships and good for other people in the world. And that's the concrete, that's the practical implications of whatever experience I claim to have had.
Well, sure, but that doesn't really answer our question, because our question, like, if the question is simply, should you act like a Christian? Sure, that's fine. I mean, I probably would disagree there too. I think there are better ideologies, but the question is should we be Christians or atheists? And so based on your testimony, I'd say, what is the better explanation there, that you actually had a conversation with an all-powerful being who created the universe, or you had a self-reflective intuition of your brain, which we have tons and tons of evidence happens, where you were talking to yourself and you interpreted that as God, and there's no really God there. That's just something that we've explained in psychology for hundreds of years, and we've known about this, and it happens to tens of thousands of people every day all over the world. It seems like the better explanation is the one that we have a lot of solid evidence for, and so that wouldn't actually count as any evidence for a God whatsoever. It'd be a zero. And that's fine if you're willing to admit that it's zero evidence is just something that you like or that's meaningful to you, but it isn't actually evidence for God. That's fine.
What would constitute evidence that you would accept?
Novel testable predictions.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Novel testable predictions.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're back to what can be provable, right? And you said you didn't have to prove it.
You can't prove anything. Novel testable predictions are evidence. They're not proof, though. But again, so anything that raises the bar above 1% is good.
Yeah, and so I think, to me, you're stuck. Your worldview keeps you stuck, and by definition, you cannot imagine anything. You maybe can imagine, but you will not accept anything that can't be proved. So,
so proof is 100%. Evidence is 1%.
I'm using the wrong word. Without evidence, by your definition of what evidence is. Okay.
Yes,
okay.
I would agree. I would say I will not accept things without evidence. That is true.
So we're at an impasse already. It's only been half an hour.
Well, no, that's fine. As long as you're willing to make that concession, I'm happy with that. That's fine. That would be one of the reasons. I think this is a reason we should probably prefer atheism. Like if you don't want to believe things without evidence, you should probably prefer atheism. That would be one of my arguments for atheism.
Okay. All right.
And then so we can go on.
What else? Well, go ahead. What else?
Yeah, we can go on to the other thing. So my next question would be: why do you think you can't get an equal or greater amount of all of the 8 things you listed from a different ideology, including atheism?
Well, as I said, yes, I don't see any meaning or purpose in the universe from a naturalistic point of view. I just don't see it. Except it just goes on and on and on. It gives me no direction as to what to do.
Well, I'm a naturalist, so I believe there is. I'm a moral realist. I'm a naturalist. It's called moral naturalism, which means that the world's only natural physical stuff, but we still have meaning, purpose, value, morality, all that stuff. It's just baked into the universe, kind of like how you think it's baked into God. So why would that be any less plausible?
Tell me what it is. Tell me what it is.
It's like
I didn't mean to say that you couldn't find it. I said I can't find it. So if you can find it in the universe, tell me what it is.
It's the nature of nature.
What is the nature of nature that gives meaning and purpose to your life?
So it's like an undiscovered law of physics that just has morality in it. It's a moral law of physics.
But bring that down to concreteness. What does that mean on a daily basis for you? What is the meaning of your life? What is the purpose of your life that comes from this undiscovered law?
Uh, well, my interpretation is that any involuntary imposition of will is immoral. But my question here is more that why would you saying morality is in God's nature be any less reasonable than me saying morality is in naturalistic pantheism's nature?
Because of the specific content of the Christian faith. And so that you have it's a whole package. It's not just an abstract concept that there's purpose in God. I'm not arguing that. I'm saying that through faith in the Christian God, that which I learn about through Scripture. That's how Christians think. That's what Christians do. That we're taught that our purpose. You can word it differently, but my summary is the purpose of humanity is to know, love, and serve God. And so I'm on an ongoing journey to try to know God better in whatever way I can, which is an extremely difficult task. To love God, I think I know what that means, but I'm learning to grow in terms of what does it mean to love my Creator and serve God. That is the easiest one of the three, because I can imagine, based on the teaching of Scripture and based on my own intuition and thoughtfulness, that anything that fits with that love ethic I talked about earlier, loving your neighbor, is what it means to serve God. So I can, without much effort, put pen to paper and come up with a lot of ideas about how I can practically love God. And so I have that purpose that grows out of the teaching of the Bible.
Sure. So yes, if we're talking about particular models, there's lots of particular models. The model I like is that we should minimize involuntary impositions of will, and we can write down on paper all the different ways we can minimize involuntary impositions of will: feed the poor, home the homeless.
But how does that grow out of nature, Tom? I don't get that. How does that grow out of observing nature?
It's a part of the essence of the law of nature. It's a thing. It's kind of like how you think God has a morality to him, that he gives us these words or whatever. I think there's a law of physics that tells us these things instead of God telling us these things. But it seemed like what you were saying was the difference is something about the particular principles or something. Like, I'm not sure what you, because my question is again, why would grounding morality in God be better than grounding morality in naturalistic pantheism? And from my perspective, they can both be grounded in the nature of whether it's the essence of the universe or the essence of God. That makes no difference. And then you said that it's about the particulars of the ideology, the particular things you're inspired to do. And the examples you gave was to love and get to know God and your neighbor in those two classes, which I can say in mine, we don't need the God part. That part is irrelevant. It's to love and get to know your neighbor, or to minimize involuntary imposition of will, be the particular way I'd phrase it. But it seems like we can construct an ideology of how to help people in life from naturalistic pantheism just fine. And I'd say it's a better model than the Christian model of, I don't think there's any need to add this love of the God thing. It doesn't seem necessary. There's also a lot of erroneous stuff in the Bible I wouldn't agree with, and murderous things that I wouldn't agree with. So it seems like my model, which doesn't have any of that, but does still have all of the good, loving, helping other stuff, seems to be like it would be a better grounds of morality.
I think I'm not done a very good job explaining my point. What I'm saying is, when I look at nature and I look at how, and again, I'm not a scientist. I'm very much a lay person, looking at what's available to me basically online, or what I studied years ago. I see that nature is very destructive in its forces. It's creative and destructive. I don't see any basis for loving other people, helping your neighbor. I don't. Tell me where it is. where in nature, if you go out and you observe nature, or whether you go out or just study it through a telescope or somehow, tell me where you see something in nature that would suggest, we should be loving people, we should be helping our neighbor. How does that come from nature?
Well, there's an epistemic question and an ontological question. Epistemically, how did we get to the conclusion that there is such a thing? Moral intuition and moral progress. Most of the professional philosophers in ethics are atheists, like 70%-ish, but they're also moral realists. They believe there is an objective morality, and they came to that conclusion by looking at the evidence of morality and using that to infer that there is such a thing. So we follow the evidence to the conclusion. But if you're asking like an ontology question, what is it made of? It's essentially the same kind of thing of what you think God is made of. He's essence of the universe, essence of existence. And it's there in the universe. It's not everything. It's not like if you look at space, it's going to be moral. Like, no. Like, we agree that 99% of the universe is uninhabitable to life. It's going to kill us. All of the stuff there is there to kill us. But we're not saying literally everything is morality. So we're saying morality is one kind of thing. It's out there. It's not the strongest force in the universe. Otherwise, we'd all be perfectly moral. It's a weak one. It's something that we can feel its effects, but we aren't like gravity stuck to earth by it. And so everything you see around you in nature, just like it's not God that we're looking at. We're not looking at the moral law when we look out into nature like that. The moral law would be somewhere hidden that we can't see yet, is undiscovered, just like God is undiscovered. And so they're both outside of the realms of the things we can just look out and see.
I'm sorry, I'm just not convinced. I think that's the best you can do, to posit an unseen moral law, but I just don't see it in nature. And I think it's
I mean, the question was, how is this different from positing an unseen God that isn't in nature and can't be seen? So the question here is, why would this be worse than the unseen God? Unseen law, worse than unseen God, because why?
I'm wondering if it'd be more helpful. Again, we're talking mostly about morality right now, and my mind's going in 5 different directions because there's related different topics to this. When I talk about the God hypothesis, all right, the imagining that there's a God, then it's all linked to our scripture and how this has been understood and written about and talked about and experienced over time. And there's a flow from a belief in God, from an experience with God that I and many other people have had, that, like the one I told you about, it wasn't unique to me. It wasn't me seeing a unicorn, imagining a unicorn, and nobody else has ever done that. This is a common experience where, especially from those of us who, from an existential point of view, a Christian existential point of view, this is a quite common experience for people to have this moment where they feel compelled to submit their will to God, to their creator, and to say, I am not the creator, I'm not above God, I'm not as smart as God, I am created by God to serve God's purposes. That's the existential shift that many people have experienced. And again, it's not like imagining Harry Potter or a unicorn. And from that discussion about who God might be, influenced by the Bible, come certain ideas about morality and that what is right and what is wrong. And so there's a whole system that supports it. It's built into a theistic Christian worldview as it's developed.
It seems like you're counting those as like,
I don't see that in a naturalistic worldview. I don't see that as it's not basic. You can say that morality has developed over time, right? That's that what you're saying? Morality has developed over time in human existence?
No.
What you're saying?
No, I'm saying morality exists as a fundamental part of the universe before any humans existed.
But you can't give me any evidence for that. There's no evidence for that.
Irony. Yes, I agree. But the point is that you already admitted you can't get any evidence for God either. So that wouldn't actually be a difference.
but God, so you're now equating my God hypothesis, which I grant is a hypothesis. Okay, so it's a working hypothesis with morality as
Well,
side by side. Because you're saying I can't give evidence for God, and you can't give evidence for the existence of
naturalistic
morality, so
pantheism.
they're the same.
No. So morality is like the question, and then God is a possible answer, and naturalistic pantheism is a possible answer. So so the alternatives here, atheism with a non-God universe, we still have morality there. We still think morality is there. But if you're saying which, because you said God explains morality, and I'm saying that we can have an equal or better explanation of morality without God. Now, there's evidence for neither of these, neither the God-based model or the non-God-based model, but they can both provide equivalent answers at the very least, which means that the point that you gave on morality, I think it was number 5 on your list, wouldn't actually be a reason to prefer Christianity because it works equally as well for both models. Yeah, and if equally as well as zero evidence from an atheist perspective, it's still equally as well. So the point here is to say that we can both come up with hypotheses to explain morality, and they're equivalent hypotheses as far as I can tell. I'd actually say the atheist one is slightly better. Therefore, morality would at best be a reason, a tie between the two, and at worst for you slightly favor atheism because I think the moral models provided by atheism are slightly better.
Okay, this is again, I think it's definition. We're still not totally communicating, because you represent my position as saying God explains morality, and what I'm saying is God provides a foundation for objective moral values, ethics, and moral values. That's what I'm saying. And I say natural world does not do that. There's nothing I can observe in nature. I can observe it in God because God is a construct. And so I've constructed God based on the Christian tradition, and in terms of God is a good God, God's a loving God, and that and I view God as a creator, and from that flows naturally morality. From that, your concept of the nature as it is however you would talk about it, I don't see how it just naturally flows, no pun intended, naturally flows like the idea of morality. It's you can observe morality in the world, but then you have to just posit, well, that must have been a natural process. And I'm saying that logically morality flows from the concept of God because it's inherent in the very, very hypothesis about who God is. And so that's a different starting place for me.
Right. So I'm saying that nature does provide an objective foundation for morality that is independent of any opinions, and it comes from a law of nature. Like, do you know what Platonic object is?
No, sorry.
Okay. It's a thing that exists prior to humans, outside of space and time. It's a thing. It exists. It's an object, and that object is a moral object. It instantiates morality. So just like you think God exists and he has I think you would say he has a moral nature to him or something. And he is the grounds of objective morality. There is a thing in nature, there's a moral object that exists that is the grounds of morality, and it's objective. So it's independent. It's a stance independent model. There's no opinions based on it. It's a thing that exists, like a moral object, like God's nature. It's a thing that exists, and we both think that there is this thing that exists. You think it's God. I think it's a law of nature that grounds objective morality independent of any opinions. So we both think that there's an objective thing in nature. Now, I agree, we can't see this thing, just like we can't see God. So that's not a difference. That's the same. Now, epistemologically, I think we can get evidence of this thing by looking at moral intuition, moral progress, answering moral dilemmas, et cetera, et cetera. We can just things that people in ethics do.
But I don't come from, Tom. See that's where we have to discuss that as well. And I would say that those who have moral intuition are by and large religious people who believe in God. So we can identify that people have consciences of some, however you want to define that, but we still can't identify where that conscience comes from. And so you can't assume it's a natural process.
Right. I agree.
From God.
So I agree that we have moral natures. Like this is true for religious and non-religious people. There's no difference there. It's the same. There's no difference. Everybody has moral intuitions. The only people who don't are like psychopaths. So we have a moral nature, and we want to explain what causes that moral nature. Could it be God? Maybe. Could it be a moral law of physics? Yes. They could both answer the question. So the question is why would we prefer the Christian solution to the naturalist solution? Because they both answer the question. It seems like they answer it equally well.
Because of the trajectory of where it goes. And that's back to my experience again, experience of other people.
Oh, I wanted to ask about that. So it seems like you're counting those as two separate things. And I like that there's the Bible and the tradition, and then there's also the moral experience we have, or something along those. And those are like two things that add together. But for me, that seems to be the same thing. Like you already have a belief of God, and then from that belief in the God, you use that to explain your moral experiences. But that's not two separate things. You're starting with your conclusion and then explaining the evidence to make it fit your conclusion. So I can do the same thing, and I can start with my conclusion that there's a moral law of physics, and then explain my moral intuitions in terms of that law, but that would be begging the question. But again, that seems to be like the same thing, and I don't see why you think that counts more in favor of your position, the fact that you have an experience and this model that you think explains the experience. I also have an experience, and I also have a model that I think explains the experience. So I don't see what the difference there is.
Well, apparently I can't convince you. And so this ultimately what it comes down to is we both have these ideas. I talk about God. When I say God is a construct, by the way, I'm not saying God doesn't exist. I'm saying my idea about God is a construct. Okay, I'm going to be clear about that. And then versus the idea about
naturalistic pantheism. Why would that not be a
pantheism? I don't know why you're talking about pantheism. I thought we were talking about atheism.
Naturalistic pantheism, if you Google it, you'll find it's just the moral view that it posits nothing beyond the ontological commitments of science. It's naturalism.
Okay. Okay. Well, I can do that later, but anyway, let's not get off on pantheism. I just was surprised by your use of the term.
Well, so I do want to pick on that a little bit. So just because it has the word theism in it doesn't mean it has anything to do with a God. Atheism has the word theism, is it? Diletheism has the word theism, is it? The fact that the word theism is in it doesn't mean there is a conscious mind involved. So there are versions of pantheism which don't include a mind. They're purely naturalistic, materialistic. There's spiritual versions that don't include a mind. It's the term pantheism is more broad and can be used in multiple contexts that don't include the classical idea of a God. It's just,
but I mean, if you break it down, from the Greek word, you have pan and theos. It's all is God. I mean, that's how it's been used classically.
It's etymological fallacy. Like if you actually look at how the word is used, like if the word diletheism means there's a non-logical structure. So the fact that the word theism is in it is completely irrelevant to the meaning here. Like you don't look at just the etymology of the word.
It wasn't completely irrelevant to Einstein, who was a pantheist. But I can grant you that some people use pantheism differently. I'm learning today. So thank you for informing me about that. Hey, let's go on. I think we're definitely at an impasse here. I'm not going to convince you, and you're certainly not going to convince me. So let's go on. What else do we want to talk about?
All right, life after death. You can have life after death equally as well under atheism as theism.
Mm-hmm. Say that again. I got distracted by one of the comments. Go ahead.
Your last point, or your point number 8, was life after death. That was one of the reasons you said you wanted to be a Christian. And you can have a life after death. The probability of having a life after death is exactly the same under theism and atheism. So I don't see why that would be a reason to be a Christian when the numbers are the same either way.
In terms of probability, you're saying?
So like there are a number of possible gods. There's a God that like doesn't care and doesn't create an afterlife. There's a God that creates a hell for everybody. There's a God who only lets atheists into heaven. All these are logically possible gods, and there's a logically possible universe where everyone goes to heaven, a logically possible universe where everyone just poofs into nothing, and a logically possible universe where everyone goes to hell. So all of the possible ways that heaven could be can be that way with or without a God. You don't need a God for heaven to exist.
Okay. Um, I'm not sure really where to go with that. I, I'm dealing rather than just logical possibilities, abstractly, which is what you're doing. I'm talking about. I ground my belief in life after death in the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and that's a concrete experience in history, whatever it means, that gives me hope. And so that, whereas the others are all just hypothetical possibilities, and I can grant that you can imagine all sorts of possible, but that it doesn't. It's not compelling to me just to have a hypothetical possibility.
I'm not seeing the difference there between, like, many Hindus argue for NDEs, near-death experiences, as evidence of the consciousness thing that exists, the consciousness field. That seems to also be far better evidence than the resurrection of Jesus. In fact, the resurrection of Jesus is rejected by the vast majority of historians because history can't adjudicate miracles. History can't support anything that lacks an empirical basis. So miracles, magic, mythical creatures, paranormal, supernatural, UFOs, none of those can be confirmed based off historical testimony. Whereas NDEs can be, because we have those all the time. Those are things that we can experimentally verify. And so it seems like there's better empirical evidence of the Hindu claim, because there's actually like an academic journal about parapsychology, which there are papers published in, which is, I don't agree with them, but it exists. And so there is empirical evidence that you could say there is a field of consciousness of some kind that could perpetuate life after death. And so that would be better evidence than the hypothetical resurrection of Jesus, as far as I can tell.
So you believe in life after death? Is what you're saying?
It's possible. I'm saying, I think that of the 8 things you listed, I don't think any of them are evidence, but I think that you can gain an equivalent alternative model to do all of those things equally or better. So if you think those things are reasons to be a Christian, and I can get all of those things on atheism, then they would also be reasons to be an atheist.
I don't think you can get all these 8 things as an atheist.
Which one do you think we cannot get?
Well, we've already talked about some of them. I'm not gonna go back over and discuss them again.
Pick one of the other ones.
To me, it helps me make sense of my desire to know God. Well, you don't believe in God, so that's not relevant to you, but it is relevant to me.
Right. I don't have a desire to know God, but I do have a desire to know the universe. And so if there was a naturalistic force in the universe, it would explain my desire to know the universe.
But I saw one of your videos. You did have a desire to know God, and you became disillusioned with God, and so you cut your belief in God.
Well, I was brought up Christian. I don't know if I had a desire to know God. I had a desire for God to cure my depression.
Yeah. So I think it's quite common in human experience to want to reach out to God, whoever God is, however we conceive of God. And I think many people turn away from God because of experience, not because of, they might go to create intellectual reasons why they don't believe in God. And I understand that flow, but I think people start with a basic belief in a higher power, in God, and even a creator of the universe. I think that's a natural default beginning position. And then they have experiences of disappointment and discouragement that eventually lead them away. And what I'm saying is I've also had some very, very disappointing experiences with God, such as when my mother had Alzheimer's disease for 14 years. We prayed and prayed, and God did not answer our prayers. And that was very disillusioning to me. And I thought that maybe I should give up my belief in God, just like many people have said. But again, it's that experience and that and the grappling with the experience that I think is more real than just philosophical arguments about God or the existence of God. And I think that's why I emphasize experience so much. I know this is subjective. I don't need to be critiqued because this is subjective. I'm saying it's subjective and it's existential. But my spiritual journey has been full of experience, existential questions, disillusionment with God, and then seeking a resolution. and recognizing I could go the route you went, but I couldn't. I couldn't go that route because I did believe in God, and it would have been dishonest for me to shut out my belief in God to say, well, look, God didn't answer my prayer, and all these terrible things are happening in the world, so I don't believe in God. Problem is, I did, and I couldn't get over that. And so my options really were to continue on with my disillusionment and my bitterness towards God. I was so angry at God, and that would make me miserable. I thought this is a stupid option. Better to give up belief in God, then there won't be anybody to be angry at, or then stay in this bitterness and rage. But then I eventually found my way to a third option, and that third option was that I could choose to trust in God. And that's what Soren Kierkegaard talks about when he talks about the leap to faith. It's not a leap of faith, it's a leap to faith. And when you build up all the rational reasons for and against God, in the end, it's inconclusive. And in that sense, I agree with the atheist who says, well, there's not enough evidence or any evidence really for God. You can even say that based on your model. But nevertheless, Soren Kierkegaard talked about, I have my own experience, and millions of people have had the same experience, that for some reason, some of us make that leap to God and that leap to faith in God. And in doing that, I found of the only three options I had in my disillusionment, that was the best option. That was the option, and I defined best by what produced greater joy, love, meaning, purpose, all these other things that I have on my list.
So if what you mean by your personal experience or our tendency to believe in higher power is the fact that many people do believe, I think that's better explained by anthropocentric fallacies, like the fact that we tend to see agency in things that there's no agency in. The classic example is type 1 and type 2 errors. If we hear a rustle in the bushes and people think it's the wind and don't run away, and it happens to be a lion, they get eaten. But if people hear a rustle in the wind and think it's a demon or a lion or a mind of some kind and always run away, they survive. And so humans have an inbuilt bias to think that there are mindness, agency in everything we see. That's why we believe in Zeus and Thor, and that there's demons in the wind, and that there's a monster under the bed, and when you turn the lights off you feel this anxiety that there's something in the darkness. All of those things have been proven to be a result of psychological factors due to evolution, and it seems like the tendency we have to believe in higher powers is explained by that fully. And so if we're comparing the two hypotheses, that this tendency to see agency as a result of there actually being a God there, or it's a product of evolution and our biases towards seeing agency in everything due to survival, it seems like the survival one is a far better explanation. And so I don't think that the fact a lot of people like to see agency in things is evidence that there's actually agency in all of those things.
And there's no question in my mind that our minds are able to produce all sorts of imaginary thoughts and jump to conclusions. We do it all the time. And to me, that's one of the greatest contributions of the naturalist perspective, is that it keeps asking the question, why do you believe that? Is that true? What evidence do you have for that? I really value that from your approach. What it comes down to is I don't think that explains everything. I think there's something more. And of course you say, well, what evidence do you have for that?
What do you think it doesn't explain? Like, that would be my question.
It doesn't explain. It doesn't explain my desire to know my creator. It doesn't explain my belief that there is a creator, that what I see in the universe is there by design.
Well, just to take those two, what do you think? How do you think it doesn't explain those? Because like type 1 and type 2 errors, false positives, if you think there's a agency in the universe, and you've been taught this through your culture that it's a good thing that there's an agency in the universe, that would seem to explain your desire to get to know your creator. Like, that's why the Romans sacrificed things to the gods, because they wanted to get to know their creator in some sense, get the favor of their creator.
No. They're not trying to get to know their creator. They're trying to manipulate the creator to do them a favor. And that is a very different level of spirituality than what I'm talking about.
Well, I don't see the difference there. So it seems like the case.
Let me explain the difference if you can't see it.
Well, I just want to clarify. So to me, it seems like the case that if you believe there is an all-powerful mind up there, that's more powerful than you, because we have this bias in us for authority and appeasing authority, we innately have a desire to submit and get to know that authority. That's just a part of biology. It has nothing to do with innately wanting to use the authority. It's just whenever there's an authority figure in every social structure, there becomes this social hierarchy that's built up in every kind of social interaction, and you have this inbuilt intuition that you want to be closer to the highest authority figure. And that's a natural bias we have. It's always there. And the fact that we see agency in everything, including the universe and volcanoes and tornadoes and everything, they're the highest authority because they're much bigger than us. And we have the desire, the same inbuilt desire to get to know them. So both of those, all of that stuff you mentioned seems to be very well explained by the natural stuff we know about.
But there's a difference between being able to describe something in psychological terms and to really explain where that comes from. And so, your idea about, we need authority structures, and it's natural for us to look up to authority structures. Who can argue with that? I mean, that's very descriptive. But for me, it's not comprehensive. It's just, absolutely everything that anybody can say, you can speculate and create some kind of evolutionary possible purpose to explain it. But that's not evidence. That's not proof. It's just conjecture. It's speculation.
Wait,
exactly what you should do. It's exactly what you should do.
I'm lost a little bit here. So just to clarify, we have proven that these two things are a fact. We know they exist. They have been proven to exist. Anthropocentric fallacies.
What have we proven?
The tendency for us to admire places of authority and want to be part of them, and type 1 and type 2 errors, those have been proven. These are facts. We know they scientifically exist. It's like color blindness. It's a thing that we have proven to exist. And so
all right,
yeah,
I'll give you that.
And so if we're wanting to explain some experience we have, like people have an experience to want to get to know God, and want to explain what caused this experience. And there's these two phenomena that we know exist for a fact and affect pretty much everybody. And they would directly cause this experience. That seems like a very good explanation. Now, if you want to compare that to, say, there's actually an all-powerful being that we don't have any evidence for, and say that's a better explanation of these phenomena than the thing we have hundreds of thousands of empirical studies that prove these two things exist and cause this exact phenomenon. That seems to be like,
I think you're exaggerating, but
I don't know, like all of these fallacies
of studies.
Yes.
Okay, well, send me the link, please.
Okay, like it's type 1, type 2 errors, extremely common.
Okay,
Daniel Kahneman wrote a book.
Psychological process of needing to get the approval of authority.
Yeah.
Authority figures. That's the one you said.
Yes, we have literally hundreds of thousands of those. That's a huge common thing that's a study in psychology. So these are
errors,
very common. We have names for them. Argument from authority fallacy. It's like, yes, we know this is a thing.
I'd love to see the link. I don't doubt that there's studies, of course, but I'd love to see exactly how far they take it, and again, even the existence. That again, my point is that that's all descriptive. It's descriptive of what they can observe in human nature, and that's all your method can ever do. It just describes what is, and I that's how I value the scientific method and investigation. It describes what is. And I'm not satisfied with what you are able to describe, because my intuition suggests that there's something more. And from the design of the universe, because I'm convinced that there is design in the universe, to my experiences with God, to the benefit that I've gained by putting my faith in the Christian God and in the Christian philosophy, and the difference that's made in my life, that whole flow it's a combination of intellectual argument and subjective. And that's where I live, and that's where everybody lives. Everybody has to put together all these pieces as best they can. And you've put it together differently. And you put your faith in the naturalistic process. And if there's anything you can't understand, you just assume that it's kind of a nature of the gaps. Whatever you
nothing I said was
explain,
subjective. None of the arguments I gave were subjective. None of the analogies I gave were subjective.
Exactly. That's right. That's your system, Tom. Your system is strictly objective as best you can. And that's why I value it.
Well, so my argument here is that if all of the reasons I gave are just strict logical arguments that there's a mirroring. It's a mirroring argument. What I'm doing, it's called a straw, as a horse, some kind of horse. I forget what it's called, but I'm taking all of the things you're saying and seeing if I can apply those same pieces of evidence to an alternative hypothesis that is contradictory. And if I can, that proves objectively without any subjective interpretation that it is not evidence. So that's really all I need to do. So it's when you say that we need to
All
have
you
this
need to do
subjective,
logically,
what?
but not it's all you need to do logically is what you're saying. Is
Yes.
if you can provide another explanation for what I experienced than the one that I'm giving, you're
That's
saying
equally
logically.
supported. Yes.
What's that? Yeah.
If it's equally supported, like the fact I could say magical squirrels did it, but that's less supported. So it has to be equally plausible.
And what is the impact of being able to do that logically? Then you can dismiss my claim. Right? That's
no. The impact would be like if it's equally supported as an alternative, then it would be logically unjustified to accept the claim for anybody, me, you, anybody. So the point would be to say that to eliminate the subjective biases and say, is there any objective reason to actually accept this? Yes or no. And we do a test using logical structures of arguments to see is there one? And if it says no, then that means it's not reasonable to accept based on rational argumentation or logic. And so the goal would be to say, if you think there's some justifiable reason to accept Christianity, and we test that reason, well, is this actually a reason to accept Christianity? We would compare it by applying the same reason to alternative hypotheses and see does it apply in both. And if it does, then it's not a reason to apply Christianity. And I don't know what you mean when you say, when you're bringing up the descriptive claim, like if there's some phenomenon we see, like I feel hungry right now, I'm hungry, and I want to explain that hunger. We would look at the biological structure of like the organ, the stomach, and how it relates to the brain, and say, oh, look, it sends the signal when you deplete on energy, and that seems to explain hunger pretty well. But then you say, well, there's alternative hypothesis of the Cookie Monster. The Cookie Monster is giving us this hungry sensations or something. Like we can say that's probably not it. It's probably the thing we can literally measure. There's this physical interaction. There's a correlation between when you have the sensation and what's going on in the stomach. Like we can measure these things. This is very, very solid. It's probably the hunger thing, probably not the Cookie Monster. And it's rational to conclude that. And I think the same thing applies when we're talking about this desire to know God feeling. Like, just like we have this hunger sensation and we can measure the correlation between the stomach and the brain, we have the same thing with type 1 and type 2 errors, with anthropocentric fallacies, with appeals to authority. We know all of those things are just massive influences on the human psychology. And we've proven they exist. They're extremely common, tons of data on all of those, just like there is for hunger. And so if we're asking what caused this phenomenon to want to get to know a creator, it's probably those things, just like it's probably the stomach that causes hunger instead of the Cookie Monster. And so I think that when you bring those things up as if it's something that's not explained by naturalism, it confuses me greatly, because those seem to be far better explained by naturalism. It would be analogous to you saying that hunger isn't explained by naturalism, and it's like, it doesn't make any sense to me. This seems to be very clearly explained by naturalism.
Okay, maybe let me try this way. I think naturalism can explain. I would imagine, okay, 'cause not being a naturalist, I know I'm over my head, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. But a naturalistic approach would have an explanation for most everything, and if you find something you don't, then you're going to posit that it just hasn't been discovered yet. That's how I understand your worldview.
Sort of. I mean, I would clarify one thing. Every worldview has an explanation of everything. It's just the problem of underdetermination. It's just a fact of all hypotheses. But yeah, we'd say we need evidence for one of them to make it reasonable.
Okay, so again, I'm just talking about your paradigm and your method, and I don't see that as mutually contradictory to what I'm proposing, because I think that I wish I could think of a good analogy. So, for example, what comes to my mind is like painting a beautiful picture. Someone can paint just a beautiful, beautiful picture and painting, and and then we can analyze it, and we can talk about where all those colors come from, We can identify all those pieces, and you can probably even examine in the minds of people as to why do you think that's attractive? Why isn't it attractive to you? I don't know what kind of studies have been done around that. But what I would say is there's still something about all aesthetics, including this one painting that I'm talking about, that just jumps out and says beauty. And it's my perception of beauty, my perception of beauty, that's a concrete, my intuition around a creator God and design in the universe, all of that is what is suggestive to me that there's something more, that there's something more to what I am observing than just my ability to describe it in a mechanistic sort of way. That's what I'm trying to say. So I'm not saying that you're wrong or that your method is faulty. I'm not arguing that. I'm saying that my intuition, perception suggests there's something more. And I'll just stop there.
Okay. To me, like what comes to mind is the God of the Gaps argument, that we have this feeling that there's something more, that there's something we can't explain yet, which there's lots of those things. We obviously can't explain everything. But then to say that there must be a God to explain this thing is a God of the Gaps. You're saying here's a gap.
I'm very well aware of God of the Gaps argument. I don't think that's what I'm saying. I mean, they used to say, things like, I can't think of a good example, but where there's lightning or something like that.
You can't explain lightning. Zeus did it.
Yeah, right. That's right. It must be Zeus. Right. I'm not arguing that. I'm saying that what I'm perceiving and experiencing in the world is suggestive that there's something more. It's not like, gee, I can't explain it, because the naturalist world you can. You just proved it to us around the authority figures. Not proved it, but you illustrated it with that example. That I think, yeah, that makes sense to me psychologically, that there could be that as part of it. What I'm telling you is that I'm not satisfied to say that explains everything, and you are, and that seems to be where the rub is in the gap.
Well, it doesn't explain everything. I agree. We don't have an explanation of everything. So I did mention that before. We definitely don't. But
okay.
My question would be is that there's infinitely many explanations. Everybody has their preferred explanation of everything. And if we don't have a way to filter out the imaginary ones from the one that actually corresponds to reality, differentiate imagination from reality, then I don't think simply the fact that we have this intuition that there's some explanation of something more, and it's whatever your particular intuition is for, is a good reason to think that your intuition is correct. We all have explanations of the unknown. Newton famously said that when he looks at the gravitational connection of the planets in the solar system and trying to do the calculations of how to measure that, he said, it's impossible. I can't do it. It must be a God. He had an intuition by looking at that thing. It was so complex, could only be done with a God. And Laplace came along like 100 years later and just did it on his own side. And Napoleon asked him, well, where's God in your hypothesis? And Laplace said, I had no need of that hypothesis, sir. And I think
that's God of the Gaps, Tom. That's a God of the Gaps.
And so I'm not
arguing that.
Well, I'm not seeing the difference. That's what I'm asking, is that to me, it seems like you saying when you see beauty in a painting, you feel this intuition that there's something there, something in that painting that indicates something more. That's the same as when Newton saw the planets and he saw the elegance of the connection of gravity, and he had this intuition that there's something more. Therefore,
something more that caused it. That's the difference. When you posit that there's a God who caused it, something I can't explain, that's a God of the Gaps. When I posit that there's something greater to this reality than not that's causing this to happen, but it's suggestive that there's something greater in the universe that I'm able to analyze. That, to me, that's not the same as God of the Gaps. I don't see that logically.
Well, like when you see a painting and you feel this essence of beauty, and you say that's indicative of something more, isn't it something more that's causing that beauty thing to exist and you to feel that, right?
I don't know if I'd use that doesn't sound like the right word to me, causing beauty. It's suggestive of something more to its essence, I suppose, is what I'm saying. something
So
more.
so my thought pattern here is like, for it to be suggestive of something more of its essence, that means there has to be some other thing with some like true essence of beauty has to exist in the universe, right? And then this true essence of beauty is imparted to particulars like the painting. Now, if the painting itself has beauty itself inside of it, and there's no need for something else like God to create that beauty, then it wouldn't be suggestive of something more, right? It would just be in the painting. So
Yeah.
for it to be suggestive of something more, there has to be something more to cause this beauty thing to exist, right?
Yeah, I think I follow what you're saying now. I mean, you're saying that if I perceive it as beautiful, and if I term it as what causes me to think that's beautiful, if I say that's God, that's like a God of the gaps. I think that's what you're arguing.
Something like that. I think like for
Yeah, yeah.
beauty to exist.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Right. So I'm saying like for beauty to exist, it seems like what you're saying is when you look at the painting, there is beauty itself is somehow in the painting, or something more is in the painting. And that something more
Well,
has to exist.
my experience of it is I'm experiencing beauty. I don't even know how I don't know how to define beauty. It's something that I know it when I see it, but I don't know how to define it other than that.
Yeah. So there's something there. We just don't know what it is yet. Therefore, what?
Yeah. And so what I said was things like beauty and aesthetics and what I perceive to be just the amazing design. When my first son was born, for example, uh, I know there's a biological explanation for the pregnancy and the birth of the child, but when I held my son in my arms, that's when I consciously said, "Now I believe in God." And I already did believe in God, but there was something about perceiving something so wonderful, so amazing, whether it's beauty or whether it's the birth of a child or whether it's the vast universe. Um, the all of that is, to me, reinforces um, my own perception that there is a God. It's subjective, Tom. It is subjective. But what I that's where people live. People are subjective people, and I think trying to stamp out any confidence in their subjective perceptions is wrongheaded. I think it's limited. It's limited. I think you think you're doing them a favor, but I think you're doing them harm because even from a natural point of view, if you look at the whole history of time, I mean, whole history of time, but the whole history of human development, and we go back to morality and we say, well, people have this conscience and et cetera, and there's an evolutionary reason for that. If in their how they've evolved to this day, if it's their belief in a creator God to whom they're accountable is really the linchpin in their conviction of what's right and wrong and their conviction that they need to do what's right, I'm not sure what the rationale is for trying to pull that away from them, even though you can argue you don't have good evidence for that. You pull that away, if from an evolutionary point of view, if that has been necessary for them to get to the place where they know right from wrong, what's the rationale for trying to pull all that away from the average person on the street?
Well, I think 3 points there. One is that I don't care what anybody believes. I'm just, because of my autism, I like to analyze ideas and see if there's logic behind them. So it has nothing to do with motivation. I don't really care what anybody believes. 2 would be is that there are atheists that argue that society would be a better place with atheist ideas, that we look at atheist societies, they're more moral, less crime, less rape, less child pregnancy, less of all of the bad stuff as far as we can tell. And so some atheists argue that they want to replace the Christian ideology with a better ideology. I agree that Christianity was good for society. It did benefit many people, and that's why it was evolutionary advantageous for people to be religious. But now we have a better one, and we should replace it with a better one. And the third was that I'm going through your argument that, like, there is, when you saw your first son's birth or whatever, you felt or saw something in that, some phenomenon. I don't think you I don't know. I don't think you'd say you directly saw God there or something.
No,
But you
that's not
saw,
what I'm saying.
right. And so, but you saw something, and that something was indicative of a God, which means that there must be some essence of something that was sourced from God in some way. And so there's some phenomenon you can't explain. It's really powerful, and you think the best explanation for that is the God thing, which seems to be a God of the gaps. That seems to be like exactly what a God of gaps is. There's some phenomenon, can't explain it. It's more powerful than what we understand. Must come from a God, or most likely
I
comes
don't
from a
think
God.
I'm saying that, but I mean, I can see why you might think that's what I was saying. Thank you for asking me to clarify it. I I think I think I was just wowed by the amazing reality of the child being born, and that somehow that human beings that this is part of human existence is having a child, feeling love for that child, seeing a child be born from egg and sperm, and that whole process. Uh, there's a very natural process. We can examine all that. I'm not saying it's a God of the gaps. It's the same kind of thing that beauty does. It propels my imagination to think that it didn't just happen by chance. This is this didn't have to happen in this way, but it did, and it's amazing and it's beautiful. I admire it, and it leads me naturally to want to believe in a creator and to praise that creator. That's what it evokes in me. Uh, that's what I'm trying to describe.
What do you mean by propels your imagination? Because that's the part that I'm trying to build a connection for.
Okay, it leads to uh, well, it's the design argument.
What I'm just let me
Sure.
I'm just something popped into my head. So it seems like you're saying this is so awe-inspiring it couldn't happen by chance, or this is so awe-inspiring it can't happen without a God, or this is so awe-inspiring that it's too complex. It seems like what you're saying is that you have this experience that there is something and it's so profound in some way that there must be something greater than just natural processes or something. It seems like that's what you're
Okay,
saying.
wait. Okay, this is a subtle difference, but I think it is a real difference. All at least in the way you reiterated what you thought you heard me say. It's like I didn't say, well, this couldn't be by chance. This couldn't happen natural. This couldn't, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I said the fact was when I saw that beautiful thing, when I saw that beautiful child, um, I believed in God. It was a positive thing. It just was created within inside of me. It was like I believe in God. It was like more like a gestalt. It wasn't a reason point by point. It's like, well, this couldn't be da 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 da. It was a gestalt type of experience where it's like I suddenly was convinced within myself.
Wait, okay, so that's the part I'm getting lost on. The convinced is the logical argument. Convinced
Yeah,
means you're
okay,
presented with.
that's probably that's the wrong word. I understand because of logic. Um, well, maybe I should just stick with the word I believed. I believed.
So you're saying it was more just like a spontaneous belief change within you or something like that.
Yeah, I think something like that. I mean, it wasn't of a total different order because, as I said, I already thought I believed in God. I already thought I believed in the Creator, but there was something that's happened, and I had the same experience. I was hiking in the Swiss Alps here this summer, and I don't know if you've ever been over there or places like it, but when I just look at the amazing uh, universe. I mean, that's very physical, one spot, but of course you can do it through books and research and see much, much more. Uh, I have the same kind of gestalt experience that says to me, well, it doesn't say to me, it comes from me. I believe in God. I believe there's a creator behind all this. And I know that's not logical, and I know that's not it's not a proof, and it's not even evidence, but that's my experience. And we're not on the fourth floor of the hospital in the psych ward. We're not having, you're not talking to somebody who's never had this experience before. I'm talking about the kinds of experiences and perceptions that that many people have. Many people doesn't make it right. It's just what I'm saying is it's not an outlier type of strange experience. It's my experience, and I think it means something. I think it means something, and in this ongoing search to try to understand what is the meaning of the universe, what is the universe, how should human beings live, how can human beings flourish, how can we really learn to love one another, and make this world a better place. And these are things I think you and I share in common in terms of values and what we want. Because there's so much that we don't understand, I prefer to continue on with the God hypothesis because of what I experience and how it feeds me. For me, it does not hinder my ability to pursue these values we talked about. It only helps. And the atheistic worldview, as I've already said, we have disagreement about it, but I think fundamentally there is no right and wrong that comes out of nature that I can perceive. And so I can't argue for the existence of right and wrong out of an atheistic worldview. I can't do it. You can do it, maybe. I can't do it and be convinced. I think something's lost when you don't honor and worship a creator. So it's not just believing that there is a God out there, like an intellectual argument, which, as we've been talking, or point, there's something existentially relevant about accepting, at least provisionally, that there's a creator, and then internally submitting my will to my creator, trusting that my creator knows better than I know about what my meaning and purpose is. It is psychological, but I hate to use the word, I won't use the word spiritual, but I'm going to mention it anyway because spiritual is impossible to define. But I'm looking for some kind of word, but I will be willing to accept at least it's psychological, but it's psychologically relevant to me and to the communities that I serve and the people who come to me for counseling and the people who are trying to make sense of their suffering, people who are trying to cope. So many resources that come from an assumption that God is real and that God cares and that there is a purpose. So many resources psychologically come from that I'm not willing to give that up just because there isn't any compelling evidence of God. That's the practical reality.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm happy to grant that. I think that, yes, there are many psychological benefits that come from religious belief for many people, and that's perfectly fine. If it makes you happy, go ahead and believe it. I have no problem with that at all.
Well, Tom, it's a little demeaning for you to say if that makes you happy, like whatever floats your boat. I'm not talking about happiness. I'm talking about shared values that you and I both have. Human flourishing, human advancing, trying to address the evils of this world, trying to come around and support the people who are suffering.
Right. Just to clarify, I put all of that in happiness. That would all be a part of happiness.
It sounds so cheap to make it about happiness. That's my reaction. So it's not whatever makes me happy. It's about what kind of philosophy is going to lead to a better outcome in my life and in the life of those who believe it. And I think that's really what this whole discussion is about today. Which atheism or Christianity is more likely to produce a better outcome? In my life personally, so you could say happiness there, but it's much more than that in terms of pursuing our shared values. Like that's what the discussion really should be about. And you're not convinced by my lack of evidence. I understand that, but other people are because they have their own experiences that drives them in a positive direction. And I'm defining positive by seeking these same values and trusting the same ethics and seeking the same kind of goals in the world to make the world a better place.
Right. I would definitely agree that's the most important goal. And I would, in that context, argue that probably a different ideology would be better than Christianity. I think that all ideologies are on a spectrum. Christianity is probably better than Islam or any of the ones that are hyper violent, I'd say. But I think there's probably better ones. I think that the best way we can I would say maximize happiness. I think that would be like the ultimate. What would be the best flourishing for everyone would be to maximize the freedom of everyone to have no involuntary impositions of will. That would be the perfect world from my perspective. And I think that having an ideology that is built around that would probably be a better ideology than Christianity and lead to better results than Christianity. And so I would say that the goal should be to create a world where we force people to do things they don't consent to as little as possible and change the laws of physics as much as possible to allow those kinds of situations. So
Did you
anything we can
say
do to,
change the laws of physics? What did you just
yep,
say?
yep, change the laws of physics.
I'm sorry, we won't go into that, but I was just curious. I'd never heard anybody say you could change the laws of physics.
Yeah, gravity was repulsive at the early universe. The laws of physics change.
Okay, all right, but go ahead. Look, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just surprised by what you said.
Yeah. So I think that's. I agree that having different ideologies has different impact on the world, and we should try to pick an ideology that maximizes the most moral outcomes, the best world for us all. I would classify that as happiness. I just put that in the happiness category, or you would probably put it in like the human flourishing category or something. And so I would say that I agree with you on that point, and I would argue that the more humanistic worldviews do that better than Christianity, and so they would be a better worldview to adopt, evidenced by the more secular society, the less crime in every way.
What are you referring to? Like Greenland, and Iceland, and Finland? Is that what you're referring to when you say that?
Japan, Norway, Sweden, Singapore.
Yeah. So we've got Singapore is largely Christian, but the Japan certainly is not. And
I think UK is above 50% non-religious. America is 40%.
Yeah, UK is really thriving now, isn't it? Sorry, atheism is growing, in the world. I mean, it seems to be advancing statistically, but again, I don't think you're going to argue that
18%.
What?
Singapore, 18% Christian.
Yes, but I think there's a disproportionate number of those people in positions of leadership. But I don't have stats at my fingertips. But I don't think you're going to argue that the number of people that hold to a view validates it, are you?
No, I'd say that if we're trying to measure the outcomes of a society based on an implementation of an ideology, I'd say that a society that has a larger portion of that ideology would have a representative analysis of like how much crime it increases as or whatever. And so like if we instituted Nazism or something and we saw a massive increase in the rates of crime against Jews, we'd say that's probably a bad ideology. We don't want that because that correlates to the crime growth. And so if we have an increase of one ideology and it causes a decrease in crime, then that's a good indication that ideology would have positive outcomes, which is what we see in secular nations and secularization.
So secularization of a government is not the same as saying that that's the outgrowth of atheism. I mean, those are two different things.
Right, because the crime rate isn't by the government, it's by the people. So I'm saying like the people adopting the ideology tends to do less crime. The government is.
I think this is a huge study that I am not qualified to really look at, but what I do know from my research days is we would need to identify all the variables and identify what beyond correlation of how many people are atheists and what the crime rate is causation, and that's going to require a lot of study. But if you want to go that route of saying, well, here, countries with more atheism seem like they're having lower crime, of course, that begs the question: what are the other factors that are different? I mean, it's a huge thing. But what is your answer to the worst mass murderers in history who were atheistic? Stalin and Mao Zedong. I mean that there's also that possibility.
Yeah.
And this takes us back to the morality issue, is that I don't see in an atheistic worldview any clear sign of what's right and wrong. I think it's a matter of committee decision. Eventually, it's like, well, let's get together and decide what is in our best enlightened self-interest. But I don't think people actually function on that level. People work in their own self-interest. And so somebody who really believes that, who really gets it, As Nietzsche got it, if we really dig down deep, we see that there is no compelling reason to do anything but in my own self-interest. It can lead to horrible consequences.
Well,
Fortunately, it doesn't.
so saying Nietzsche is a representation of someone who actually gets atheism is like saying Hitler is a representation of someone who actually gets Christianity. There are lots of bad people who adopt an ideology, like Mao and the
Stalin.
North Korean Stalin. Yes, so there are always the Crusades, the witch hunts, most of the popes and the priests who've done very bad things. There are lots of Christians who have done bad things, just like there are some
Absolutely.
atheists who have done bad things. But if we want to look at the aggregate popularity, like those guys are all like socialist communists, like there's a political ideology there that causes lots of harm regardless of what your religious ideology is, and so most likely those are attributed to the political ideology, not the religious ideology. When we look at the religious ideology of just atheism, and compare it to the religious ideology of Christianity, there is some rate of people who become violent, but the tendency is that the vast majority of atheists are the least violent, least criminal in society. There are obviously examples of communist Russia or whatever, but if we're looking at the tendency, it goes the other direction. Just like there's, and we can develop bad examples on both sides, clearly.
Okay, fair enough. But I think about like what happened in Tibet. One of the things that when the Chinese came in and took over there, to them, the Mao's philosophy was religion is reason. We want to stamp it out. Now I think the last I heard, over 1 million Tibetans have been killed because of the struggle there. What I'm concerned about, and you didn't say this. Okay, you didn't say this. So
well,
I want to be fair to you.
I do want to bring that up. So, one sec. I just want to clarify that, like, every religion goes into the countries and wipes out the other religions. Like the 15 of the top 20 most countries with the worst Christian persecution are Muslim, unsurprisingly. So yes, when a new ideology comes in, there's a tendency to try to wipe out the old ideologies that has nothing to do with whether or not it includes God. That's just all ideologies do that.
But then you have to look at the ideology. So okay, this is great. This is a great conversation because it keeps going to different branches. But one of the things I appreciate about Christianity is that built into the system is an ability to critique the egregious excesses or atrocities. And so, yes, there have been some terrible things like the Inquisition. As far as we can tell, only 3,000 people were killed. I feel sorry for those 3,000 people for sure. It was terrible. But in the end, yeah, I found statistics on that. I mean, there are people that claim it without any evidence that there were many, many more, but I don't have evidence.
30 to 300,000 is the current.
Yeah, 30 to 300. So 30 is what I've seen. And so, I mean, it's a terrible thing. But even say all the witches that were killed, it wasn't tens of millions or maybe 50,000. That's a lot. But the point is there were millions more Christians who were not participating in killing witches and killing Muslims.
It was about 110,000 in the witch hunts.
Well, again, that's not according to my statistics.
I'm just pulling up academic journals these are published papers.
I also read published paper that said 50,000. So again, we could have competing.
I'm happy with that. 50,000 is fine.
Okay, but the point is, it's not to just throw that out. It's like, what about the Crusades? What about the witch hunts? Christians are really awful people, or they really have done terrible things. It's they have, but built into the system is an ability to critique that, as has happened even with slavery. I mean, there were Christians who were supporting slavery, but it was ultimately the Christians in UK who were leading the charge, and also Christians in the north of the United States who, for moral reasons, for Christian reasons, said this is an evil that must stop. And so there's a check and balance in there. With atheism, I don't see the check and balance. Fortunately, as you're telling me, there are a lot of nice atheists, and that's great. That's fortunate for the world. But I'm saying fundamentally, without any kind of a moral system that demands or requires love and kindness and mercy and justice, I think we're going to keep seeing these kinds of egregious experiences, like with Stalin and with Mao, and who knows who's next. But so So to me, that's my backdrop on my concern about atheism as a foundation for morality. And so, but let's just say that atheism equally can produce a really good ideology that for human happiness and flourishing. I mean, I'll grant you that it could also do that. I can imagine that as well. So could we at least agree that there are some dangers in what I've seen in some of the new atheism, so-called new atheism, the hostility or the mission or drive to try to drive out all religious belief, drive out all superstitious religion, because that kind of impulse to drive out an orienting principle for people like that, I mean, isn't that just on the same spectrum as eventually just taking the guns out and forcing them and shooting them?
No.
Okay, why not?
Well, atheists who disagree with Christianity and debate the topic aren't the same as people who literally just mass murder. Like, so that would
Of
be like
course,
saying,
I didn't say that. I didn't say that you were, Tom.
well, no, no,
I,
no. So, like, the comparison you made between new atheism and Stalin is like the comparison between you and me talking and Boko Haram and me talking. There would be a very difference between that dynamic and the relationship there. The new atheists are just like they like to debate. They're not. There's no implication of wanting to eradicate religion. In fact,
is that true,
Christopher,
Tom? Is that
yes,
true?
yes,
I
Christopher
heard
Hitchens
you
was
say
asked.
that for
Richard
you.
Dawkins asked Christopher Hitchens, if you could eliminate all religion from the world tomorrow, would you do it? And he said no. The new atheists are not trying to eliminate religion. They want to eliminate religion from politics. That's for sure. That's definitely true. But they don't want to eliminate religion. Like if I eliminated religion, I'd lose my job. I would have no occupation anymore. This is not. Atheists are
Okay.
not okay with just eliminating religion. They don't care. They just don't want it in politics.
Well, I get that for sure. I agree with you on that. Okay, this could be explored a lot more, but again, back to my value on looking at trajectory. I think these are all valid subjects to say, okay, what is the basis of morality, as we've already talked about, and how will I, in fact, treat other people or respond to other people who think differently from me? How far will I go in that? I think apart from just painting out that landscape, the reason it even came up was that I was saying that we should not assume that atheistic ideology is better, automatically better, or necessarily better, because I think it also
Absolutely.
be a setup for great great abuses, as it has been in history, just as some religious groups certainly have also committed great atrocities.
Oh yeah, I absolutely agree. We should never just assume one is better just for no reason. That would make no sense. But I would say that if we look at the evidence seems to indicate that the outcomes are better. There are obviously downsides to both, but the one thing you mentioned was that there's an inbuilt moral system in Christianity where there isn't one in atheism, which I agree. Atheism doesn't have an inbuilt anything. But I believe morality is objective. So we can see societies getting better independent of any written down books. And it seems like the written down books slow down that progress. They don't increase it. And so having this inbuilt moral system in some
That's a great topic, by the way, but go ahead.
yeah. So having an inbuilt system of morality written down in a book seems to not do anything because the book is a reflection of the moral progress in the people who write the book. And the moral progress happens independent of the book. So we can see in societies that there's moral progress without books of any kind. I would include like LGBT rights, trans rights, ending slavery, workers' rights, minimum wage rights. All these kinds of things are evidences of human moral system improving. I think that our morals have improved greatly since the origin of Christianity, and that Christians of the past were far less moral than we are today, which is why we see progressive Christianity is a thing. And I think that the fact that we as humans innately become better people is independent of the fact that there's a written down system in a book somewhere. And so the fact that there is an inbuilt book for Christianity really doesn't seem to have an impact on the moral progress of society. And so atheism not having that is really independent because I think there is this objective morality that's moving us towards a more moral essence of our nature. And so we don't need any kind of written down book thing to have that.
So that I think that goes along with what you talked about being a humanistic perspective. right? I mean, so it sounds like you've got a fundamentally positive view of human beings. The human beings, if 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 they would embrace this more naturalism and the worldview you talked about, that they would naturally progress toward a better and better society. That's what you're saying.
I think that we are progressing regardless. So Islamic society is progressing. They legalized women's right to drive about 5 years ago. Christian society is progressing, progressive Christianity. Every society in human nature, as we gain in technology, is becoming more moral. The great book, Better Angels of Our Natures by Steven Pinker, explores this, that even given Nazism and Stalinism, humanity as a whole is better than it's ever been, ever. And that pattern is going to continue regardless of which ideology we pick, because I think the ideology is going to change to fit our moral natures at the time period. That's why I think that people reinterpret Christianity for some things like progressive Christianity, because as we become more moral, we make the ideology fit our moral stature of the society. And so even if we stayed with Christianity, the world would still get better. I just think it'd get better faster if we were humanist.
It's an interesting hypothesis. I just look at the history of humanity, and I look at my own heart and mind and anybody I've ever known, and I don't see I should see right. I see right alongside my impulses to do good. I see impulses to do wrong, and they just exist side by side. And I think an unfettered humanity doesn't necessarily produce good. I think that's naive. For whatever progress we're making in society, we'd have to try to identify what are the causes of that, what's producing that, and I think there are multiple causes for that. But again, that would require some kind of a database research, massive database research, rather than just making assertions.
Right. That's why Steven Pinker, Better Angels of Our Nature, he has all of that stuff.
That's the Harvard guy, I think, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
Harvard or Stanford?
It doesn't matter. I'm just trying to place him in the universe. Yeah. And so I have not read that book yet. And it sounds, I'd be very interested to read that. But again, it doesn't, I'm skeptical, not of his books, I haven't read his book, but I'm skeptical of overconfidence in human nature. I remember from my history days at the end of the 19th century, I mean, the Europeans thought they had it all figured out. We had this unity and this peace, the peace of and they figured out how to be mutually respectful of everybody in their kingdoms, and the whole thing blew up. And we had the first and then the Second World War, and it was the worst disasters in European history. So I think we need to be careful about naivete around human nature. And I think we need to be darn careful about how we go forward. And I'm more eclectic in my real thinking. I mean, in real practice, I mean. And so, as I already said, I value all of your questions are great questions. I mean, I don't want to give you the idea that I don't value them, because I do, and I try to apply them to myself. But I also value the religious tradition, my religious tradition, and there's a part of me that consistently believes that there's something that the Christian tradition contributes, it can contribute, that the world would be in a worse place without it. And so I'm not willing to give it up for that reason. But I want to include the other insights from other disciplines and perspectives as well, as much as I can.
Cool. We do have some questions from the audience, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, I love it.
So Harry Nick asked, how do atheists create art, music, and literature?
That must be for you. That's questions for you.
I think it's in reference to when you said that there's beauty that's related to God in some way. And so it's trying to imply that if you don't believe in a God, how do those people still find beauty and meaning and purpose and those kinds of things to make these? It seems like you don't need a God for that, I think, is the implication of the question.
And to me, how do atheists create art, music, and literature? I was not saying that only Christians can create art, music, and literature. That would be absurd. I'm saying that my perception of in aesthetics, of art, music, literature, and being able to recognize something that's particularly beautiful or brilliant is to me an evidence that there is a creator. There is a reason why we have evolved to this place that's not just explained by chance. But I wasn't saying atheists couldn't create art or music or literature.
All right, gotcha. Question for Tim: do you feel that you have universally compelling reasons why everyone should prefer Christianity over atheism?
That's a great. Thank you for asking that question. No, I don't, because I don't think it's possible for me myself to produce compelling reasons for somebody else. I think as my worldview and theology have developed over the years, I believe that my job is to witness to, in other words, give my experience, share my experience with other people, because I believe spirituality is something that has to happen between you and God. And so if nothing happens, it wasn't because I had bad reasons, because I don't think there are reasons that will compel everyone. I am satisfied with sharing my reasons and my experience with you, and I would hope you would be open. You would be open to the possibility that something in my experience might be available to you as well, through Jesus Christ or through faith in God. And either you are or you aren't. But that's. I hope that explains my perspective on this one.
Gotcha. Johan asked, would you lose meaning if you found out God didn't exist?
I'd be real disappointed. Okay, I'd be real disappointed. Would I lose meaning? I would lose my understanding of meaning, the meaning that I have right now, because the purpose of life, as I said to you, is my summary is to know, love, and serve God by serving other people. So some of that would go away. What would I do? This is what I actually would advise people to do this when I'm counseling them. Is if you're not a religious person and you cannot imagine God, then I think you're best from an existential point of view. This is an existential point of view. Rather than go to nihilism, instead create your own meaning. Try to find meaning that's not necessarily inherent in nature, because I don't think it's there. But you do have agency as a human being to imagine a better life for yourself and a better world, and give yourself to that. And I think you will find when you're doing that, you are going to you're going to need resources to be able to do it. You're not going to be able to do it all on your own. And so do what you can on your own, but then you're also going to need to find resources. Those are two parts of that answer.
Gotcha. All right. If you had been born in Syria, would you be Muslim? So how real is Christian faith?
That's a great question. I think, if I try to answer that just statistically, the answer would be I'd be a Muslim now. It's just like if I were born in India, I'd be Hindu. If I were born in Southeast Asia, I'd be Buddhist. So that statistically that's right. But that phenomenon does not invalidate, in my opinion, my faith in God or my belief in the reality of God and the importance of the religion and religious faith. So what do I mean by that? That by my worldview, I think all human beings, for whatever reason, and for me, I'd say it's a created reason, but without proof of that, I'll just simply say it's just a phenomenon. That all human beings, or most human beings, have some kind of desire to know their creator. they believe there is a creator and they want to know that creator, or somehow get the favor of that creator. I think that's more practical, as Tom pointed out earlier. They want answers to their prayers. And so you're going to pick whatever system you were born into. It's just practical, it's logical. And so I think there are, and this is conjecture, not entirely, I mean, I could produce names, but I think that throughout the world, there are people who have this right perception about the reality of God, no matter what religion they're in. And they follow the rituals and even probably adopt some of the beliefs more or less wholeheartedly, maybe not at all wholeheartedly. And they're in their religious tradition. But there are those who recognize the existence of God and submit their heart and will to God. And there are those who are just religious people. And if I were in that situation and nobody ever brought to me any information about Jesus Christ, then I think I would stay a Muslim. I would be a Muslim. Of course, Muslims do talk about Jesus, so I would know about Jesus, but I wouldn't know it the same way. And so I think, so that's the backdrop. So I think the question that you're asking, if I understand it correctly, is would God be able to reach me if I were a Muslim in Syria and didn't know anything about the Christian faith, or I wasn't a Christian? And I believe so. I absolutely believe so, that if it's true that God does want to have a relationship with human beings, he wants to have relationships with those human beings who want to have relationships with him, then I believe he would reach out to me there. And it doesn't, my location or even the religion doesn't undermine the reality of my Christian faith, because the reality that I described to you was not about the Christian faith. It was about my encounter with God. And the Christian faith is what, that because that was my environment, that's where I turned to get some explanation. Well, who else has had an encounter with God? Well, what does this encounter mean? How have other people interpreted it? How have my elders interpreted faith and the existence of God? And so Christianity is about taking on a cloak to further explain and amplify and give me direction for my faith. But it doesn't invalidate the reality of it, not based on where I am or how I had the experience.
Gotcha. Thank you, Charles, for the super chat. Appreciate it. And didn't ask a question, though. Harry asked a question. If I'm just brain fizz, how can I create a sculpture that can move you emotionally?
I don't know that term, brain fizz. Could you explain that to me?
It's a Seitan Bruggencate thing. He says, if atheism is true, we're just fizzing brains because it's all just material stuff, and so they're no soul stuff. And so if we're all just material stuff, how can would it be possible to create sculptures that can move you? Or maybe he's saying, like, from an atheist perspective, since he's brain fizz, he doesn't, but you have a soul or whatever, can his atheistness create a sculpture so beautiful that a Christian could be moved by it or something?
I don't think your ability to create a beautiful sculpture is dependent on how fizzy your brain is. I think it's really, from my worldview, it's about how God has imbued you with abilities. We don't all have the same abilities, but some people have the ability to create beauty. So that's my answer.
Gotcha. Joking atheist. Does Timothy think existence requires time? Can God exist without time?
Well, I think time is a creation of God. So it's part of the whole universe. I can't imagine the universe without time. I think that's created by God. And that's, so the answer is yes. And if you want me to explain it more, I can't. I think that's the best I can do for that one.
I think he's implying, because there's an atheist trope argument that if God is timeless, spaceless, and immaterial, that means he exists nowhere at no time, never existed. He exists nowhere, never existed, and is made of nothing, or something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. How long asks, if he looked into his child's eyes and saw the fallen being filled with sinful nature?
I didn't see that. That was
Saw a
interesting.
fallen being. If he looked into his child's eyes and saw a fallen being, how
What's
would you
the
react differently? Like, because I think he's referring to the fact when you saw a child being born, you saw God, or you came to the belief of believing in God. I think he's saying, what if the opposite happened?
it's kind of hard, to deal with a hypothetical that I didn't experience, right? Because I this is what I did experience, and that was my result. I I'll tell you though what the question makes me think about. Um, I, I'm guessing this is from somebody who grew up in some kind of Christian tradition, Catholic, maybe Catholic tradition, or where they emphasize the fallenness of human beings and sinful nature, um, uh, which Apostle Paul teaches, and and I think we do have some kind of we certainly have a proclivity towards what the Bible calls sin, that is doing wrong. It's not just disobeying God; it's disobeying God because it's wrong. It's doing something that's harmful to yourself or to other people, and uh, I just think that would be so sad if I looked into my child's eyes and that's what I saw. I think that would be so incredibly sad and such a warped view. Uh, and I'm a little hesitant to talk too much about this because I think that some of the people who write a question like this, or somebody else who's thinking about it, has been so uh, uh, oppressed almost by this kind of doctrine. They just feel like they're a bunch of trash, according to the religious tradition, and as a result, they either still believe that or they've broken away and say, "I reject all of that." So I thinking maybe this question is pointing to something like that. And in my experience, so I didn't have time to give you this experience where I really experienced the love and grace of God for me personally. But it was just a tremendous breakthrough for me because I'd been working so hard to try to do what was right, and I failed at even doing what I said I thought was right, and I just felt bad about myself. And the breakthrough experience I had one time was that I all of a sudden I had this realization that I thought about that experience I had with my son, and I all of a sudden for some reason I just came to believe that God could see me with all of my failures and all of my weaknesses and limitations and still accept and love me, even the way that I loved and accepted my son. I even said to my son, I said this out loud. I mean, it seems like a very strange thing to say, and I hope nobody was really listening. I said, no matter what you do in your life, I will always love you. And that was my conviction at that point, and it's been true. He's 36 years old now, and we haven't always agreed or with everything he's done or improved necessarily, and he hasn't improved everything I've done. But we love each other, and the bond is so strong, and that made me think by analogy that God could even look at me and say, yeah, I see a sinful person, but my love is greater than that. I accept this fallen person, and by my mercy and grace, I've done everything necessary to be in a loving relationship. So this person can be, and I do, meaning God views us as someone who's beloved and loved.
Gotcha. Charles asked a question to go with a super chat, if I can find it. Uh-oh, did I not save it?
He can put it back in if he wants.
Oh, I found it. There it is. Is faith simply an answer you give when you don't have good reasons? If you have good reasons, is faith still required?
Faith's simply an answer you give when you don't have good reasons. If you have good reasons, is faith still required? um, I think let's break that apart a little bit. It's a great question. I think faith. I think what I'm hesitating on is this idea about answer. Faith for me is more about trust than it is answer. I don't have answers for why God has allowed the world to be as God has. I mean, I don't have an answer for that. I can't explain all human suffering. I can't. There are a lot of things that really trouble me about the world, and I don't have answers to that. Faith is choosing to trust in God in spite of not having answers. Faith is choosing to trust in God and live with unanswered questions. It was a logical choice, as I mentioned to you in my after my mom's Alzheimer's disease. Many times since then, I realized I could either be bitter and angry at God, I could jettison my belief in God, or I could choose to trust God because based on my evidence in other ways, I did believe. And I couldn't deny my belief, and I could choose. I could Soren Kierkegaard leap to faith. So when you don't have good reasons, I would say, and I think this is what you mean, sufficient reasons. I don't have sufficient reasons to put my trust in God. Yeah, that's what faith is. And if I have good reasons, is faith required? Let's talk about that for a second, because I would think the naturalism, naturalist worldview, believes they have very good reasons to stick with the null hypothesis that God does not exist. There's no evidence for God, so I don't need him. I have good reasons. I don't need faith. And that would be one example of having reasons and not needing faith. There are other people on the Christian side who think they can prove God's existence. They think they've got good reasons. They don't need faith either, because they think it's a provable matter. I don't agree. I don't agree with that. In fact, I think that's a weaker argument than the naturalist in this one area. What is the implication? What I'm saying is, a person may think that he or she has good reasons, but I think they should really be examined. Just as Thomas tried to do, examining my reasons today, I think you also should really look, not only in your mind, but in your heart of hearts and in your experience, to say, do you really have good reasons not to have faith? So those are some of the complexities that come to my mind with that question.
Gotcha. Ask him if God he thinks it is good for human flourishing if a God decided to drown most people on Earth.
This actually leads to a very, very important theological idea. One that for me, another reason, intellectual reason why I value Christianity versus atheism. Not that he drowned people. Don't jump to that conclusion. That's not what I'm saying. And this is it. That what Scripture teaches, I'm talking about the Hebrew Scriptures and Bible, Christian Bible, teach over and over again, is that humans are not at the center of the universe. God belongs at the center of the universe. And I'm not talking about physically, I'm talking about in this undefinable term, spiritual sense, or recognition sense, or sense of what is really real. Though I can't see God, I can't manipulate God, I can't test God, but it's existential, that once I make the shift from saying that God is there for me, if he doesn't answer my prayers, then God's bad. Or God allows this bad thing to happen in the world, so God's bad. And everything's about us. And the consistent scriptural teaching is that we need to shift that worldview to put God at the center and God's will. And so you're talking about the story of the Noah's flood, of course. And according to the narrative, God destroyed the world because the people refused to acknowledge God. If God is a creator, that's not illogical at all. I mean, if God is a creator and God is good, I don't know why he doesn't wipe out the whole world in the first place. I mean, and I know that does a number on your head. My point is, because there's so many problems in the world, why not wipe out the world and start over again? Anyway, I'm not arguing that he should do that. I'm just saying that if God is the center and God will, recognizing his authority, says, okay, if we do what is right, then we hope for and pray for, expect justice from God. But if we reject God and we refuse to believe in God, refuse to submit ourselves to God, then we're on our own. And I think God can still be good and still decide that, all right, that's not why I created them. I'm going to start over.
Gotcha.
Don't take that to mean that I'm indifferent to the suffering of the world. Okay, that's not at all. I think you know that that's not at all what I'm saying.
Related question: how many people do you think God has killed, commanded to be killed, and what do you say to that?
How many people God has commanded to be killed or killed himself? Okay, let's just take a naturalistic worldview here for a moment. What do human beings do who are alive? What do they eventually do? They die. They die. All human beings die. And so if we're going to just examine strictly based on the evidence of what happens in humanity, there are births and deaths all the time. I don't, Tom, you would know the answer to this question better than I would, but how many species have gone extinct over the years? If God
99% of them.
Yeah, 99%. So that, from a naturalistic point of view, you should. I want to ask you, why are you concerned about who dies? Because that's what everybody does. It's only a matter of time before everything is extinct. And so
we think it's immoral. We think nothing should die. We think if there was a moral being or if we had control of our physics, we'd just stop all death.
Yeah. So that would, I recognize that as that is your desire, but for me, if I'm going to derive a moral basis based on what is, not what I want it to be, in nature, all I see is death. I see the life and death, life and death, life and death, life and death, and it seems like that is the natural order. And so I have to have some compelling reason to step outside of that. Well, why not just say, yeah, that's what we do. We have some insects that live one day, some that live a week, some that live a year, and human beings get to live 60, 70, 80 years. So we get a little bit longer lifespan, but we're all going to die. And so if that's the nature of things, then I'm not surprised that people would die. And I'm not surprised that God would allow somebody to die, because they're going to die anyway. So if in the billions and billions of years, somebody dies at 22 instead of at 82, I can't even measure how small that is in the course of all of history. They're still dying. And so that's the first thing to take off the table, is our outrage that somebody would die. But I think the second thing is we need to ask, well, if God really is behind any of like premature killings, why would he do that? And I think these are I already gave you the answer about what the text says in Genesis about their rebelling against God, and God punished them for that. But there are many situations I cannot possibly answer. And that's what, as you, I'm sure, well aware of, that's called the theodicy question. It's how do we explain, is God really just? Is God really good, given all of this? And that's a fair question. But I don't have an answer for that. And so I can only assume that to me, there are two major options. Is either God has his reasons that I don't know, or that God, by design, has limited his power. And so he's allowed nature to run its course. And that includes human beings killing each other, includes species going extinct. And so when I think logically, those are the only two that I can come up with. I mean, the third option, of course, logically, is that God is really, a malevolent brute who's just out to kill people. And if you believe that, A, you're not an atheist. You do believe in God. And B, you better run for cover. Okay, you better keep your head low and try to avoid this. And that's what my students in Myanmar have to do. They have to keep their head low so they don't get killed by the junta. And that's what people in North Korea have to do. And there are all sorts of malevolent people out there. And that's the practical thing to do. But that's not a satisfactory option to me, because as I said, I've had experiences and belief that there is goodness in God.
Gotcha. Trinity can't be true. Anything has anything that has a limit is dependent on something else to define its limit. If in Trinity you can't distinguish one from two, is there no limit? If there is no limit, what defined those limits?
I mean, seriously, you're going to ask me to explain the Trinity? uh, the Trinity is another construct. It was created by the church to try to explain the relationship between God the Father, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit. Period. It's something that can't be fully explained. I mean, they tried in the 4th century, tried to put words around what this might mean, and I think they were groping in the dark a little bit, or a lot. And so for me, that I would say that, I mean, remember, I'm a New Testament person, so I spend a lot of time with these kinds of questions. And so from a modern point of view, looking back, I say that the concept of a Trinity was a way to say Jesus was not a normal person, just a normal human being. There was something more here. And the Holy Spirit is something they experienced at Pentecost. And so they have to factor that in. And so James Dunn, who's a well-known professor, he's deceased now, but a professor from, I think he was at the University of Durham in the UK. He talked about that the birth of Christianity is explained as a combination of an extension of the Jewish faith of the 1st century under Jesus' leadership, and the necessity of explaining 2 very significant phenomena. The first is the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, and the second would be the coming of the Holy Spirit. And so those, in their experience, these were facts that they had to reckon with. And so in order to do that, they created a theology that we now call the Trinity. But don't ask me to logically try to put all the pieces together. I come back and say, we come up with ideas all the time as our best attempts, our working hypotheses to explain something that we either can observe as real or perceive as real.
Gotcha. Tim says, last question for me, does he think the Christian faith accurately depicts his personal experience of God? Can no other doctrine fit it as well?
I'm just rereading the question. Okay, I think it's a really appropriate question, in my opinion, really appropriate. And I think we should ask that of everybody and anybody who has any worldview or anything they talk about in terms of their relationships or their experience. Is there another possible explanation? And in practice, I'm talking about not theoretically, not logically, but in practice. I mean, in other words, where I live and how I have to grapple with all of these ideas and realities in my practical life with my limited abilities. I think Christian faith best explains my personal experience. Best to me, because I know it the best. And at the same time, I have to say that I think I only could possibly understand this much. Because Tom would say nothing at all, but I would say at least this much of what's going on in my life. And these are pointers to a reality, but humility demands that I acknowledge that whatever is really true has got to be so much beyond my ability to fully comprehend. But I don't have the luxury of being in a position where I can observe this objectively. It's just as if I can figure it all out. Instead, I have to, in my own experience, I have to live my life. I have to have a family and love other people and try to make this world a better place. And so I embrace the Christian faith because for me, as I said earlier, it's the best explanation for those 8 preferences, those 8 experiences that are so meaningful and life-changing to me. And so, but at the same time, I hold this openness that it's only a matter of time before I'm going to understand something else, something better, um, or be able to see the value of other doctrines as well. But in my study, I haven't found it yet. In my study of the other religion, which I don't know as anywhere near as much about, but I've been in Southeast Asia for 15 years. I study a lot about Buddhism, and I'm not finding a good alternative. Of course, today we're talking about atheism and a naturalistic worldview. Could that be a good alternative, good explanation? And I believe it can offer ideas about natural psychological explanations for some of the things that I experience. But at this point, I'm not convinced that they are comprehensive. And I am convinced, use the word convinced. I do believe that there is something more, and that something more is worth seeking and pursuing the rest of my life.
Awesome. Well, we've been going for about 2.5 hours, so long conversation. Really appreciate you coming on. It was a great conversation. Do you want to give any links or references where people can find out more about your work?
They can certainly go to fhlglobal.org. fhlglobal.org. That's my ministry website, but there are resources there in English and some in other languages as well. My books are listed there. The book that's probably most connected to our topic for today is one that I published 2 years ago called What We Can Expect from God Now, 7 Spiritual Truths of Trusting God in Troubled Times. And I think you'll appreciate the context for writing this book, because when COVID hit, I had on one side, just very sincere Christians who were just convinced that God was going to stop this COVID virus immediately. And they were praying and asking God to do this. And there was even one popular minister in Myanmar who would defy the laws of gathering people. Who got up and said, I can't, I'm a believer in Jesus. And so this virus can't cure me. This virus can't infect me. Well, naturally, he got infected and went to the hospital. And so so there was part of me that said, wait, how can we address these false expectations that God's going to do something special here that he hasn't done in the Black Plague and many other things? And on the other extreme, I have my other friends who are more atheists saying, what are you talking about? God's not going to do anything. That's just make believe. If you spend one moment thinking that God might do something, you're crazy. You're wasting your time. And so I thought, okay, I've got these two extremes on both sides of me. And so what I did was I decided to look into scripture. It wasn't brand new, but I took something I'd written earlier and amplified it. And it was my way of coming up with some appropriate biblical expectations for how does God work in the midst of suffering. And from a Christian point of view, what should we expect? What should be our attitude? What couldn't we hope for? And how does God work when he doesn't work when these two extremes are not good explanations or adequate for giving us guidance going forward? So that's that one book that I think that, and that you can get that on Amazon as well as find on my website.
Awesome. Thanks again for coming on. Really appreciate it. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yeah, Tom, thanks. Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate your questions and all the questions from all the listeners. It was very meaningful to me. So take care.
Absolutely. Thanks again. And I'll talk to you later.